Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of our PALCUS FYI webinar series. Today, we are talking about Make Portuguese Count, which is our national campaign to encourage folks to write Portuguese as part of their ethnicity, self-identification. But Marie Fraley, who is here with us, she will get all into the nitty-gritty details on what that means and how to do that. So Marie is our National Census Director that has led this effort for the last year and a half, almost 2 years. And she's also on the PALCUS Board of Directors. So really glad that she's here. Just some housekeeping. If you have some questions, everybody is on mute. And so you'll want to type your question into the chat box in your Zoom console, and then I will read the question out to Marie, and we just keep everybody on mute so that there's no background noise and everybody can fully understand what's being said. So again, our presenter today is Marie Fraley. Marie's been involved with PALCUS for, gosh, about 15 years now, Marie, I think it's been, if not more.
I think so.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
And so I always joke that Marie retired from her regular job so that she could take on this volunteer job full-time because it really has been a full-time job recruiting organizations and individuals and even traveling to different communities and really driving this whole effort. And so we're really thankful to have you here, Marie, to answer all of our critical questions about the census and what it means for our community. So I'm gonna hand it over to you.
Okay, thanks, Angela. And I'm really pleased to be here, and I'm happy to have this opportunity to talk to everybody about Make Portuguese Count. Because as Angela says, yes, we've been working on this for a good year and a half now. But it's the time is upon us because everything will really kick off next week on March 12th. So this is a great opportunity to learn the nitty-gritty about the campaign, but also about how to write Portuguese on the race origin question and to make sure that we can move forward with this and get the kind of data that we need. So just, quickly, we're going to talk a little bit about, PALCUS for those of you who aren't familiar with us, what the background of the campaign is, why it's important for us as Portuguese, what the census will ask, how to respond, and exactly what our next steps are going forward. So moving along, in case you don't know about PALCUS, PALCUS is the Portuguese American Leadership Council of the United States. We're a national advocacy organization for Portuguese Americans throughout the U.S., and we've been working at it for over 29 years now. And just to let you know, this is the current board of directors, all volunteers from different parts of the country representing different parts of the Portuguese community. And this is a very hardworking group and a great team to work with.
It's a good-looking group, too.
Well, if we do say so ourselves. Yeah. But PALCUS is not just about Make Portuguese Count. You can see there the 4 pillars of our strategic program: education and culture, community relations, international relations, government relations, a whole variety of programs that is specifically to serve the community. And there you see, last but not least, is Make Portuguese Count in the 2020 census. So let me talk about what Make Portuguese Count is about. So this is a campaign that was designed by PALCUS to make sure that everyone with Portuguese ancestry who lives in the United States is counted as Portuguese this time in the 2020 census. We are working directly with the US Census Bureau as a special partner in the campaign, and I believe that we are the only national complete count committee in the Bureau's history. And actually, this was an idea that was hatched in June of 2018 at the national conference when we had our partnerships specialist and now coordinator, Ram Brown from the US Census Bureau, talking to us at that time. But we also have the full support of the Ministerio dos Negocios Estrangeiros of the government of Portugal, the Embassy of Portugal and all its consulates, the regional government of the Azores, and the Luso-American Development Foundation. Their support is something we're very grateful for, and is been the wind beneath our wings as we move forward with this.
Now, just want to add for everybody to be fully aware that we have been working with the Census Bureau for a long time, and Marie specifically is in contact with them directly. I mean, we're probably talking to them on a weekly basis. So this isn't something that we have gone off and done on our own. We have worked very, very closely with the Census Bureau on this. So all the data that we're reporting here today is approved by them. This is exactly the same messaging they're giving out. And so you can be confident that what we're saying here is correct and in line with the US government.
Exactly. Okay, and of course, as I mentioned, the Complete Count Committee, there are 10,000 Complete Count committees across the country, and we were one of the first to sign on for this 2020 census. And this is fundamentally a steering committee that oversees the developing the strategy, the policy, and the implementation. And members are representatives of business, academia, technology, marketing, strategy, and social services from both East and West Coast. So this is pretty much our steering committee that advises on how we move forward with this. So moving along, so why make Portuguese count? Well, how did we come up with that? Well, it just seems to make sense. It has a double meaning because, of course, we want to enumerate or count all U.S. residents of Portuguese ancestry, but we want to generate data that will show our strength in numbers, but to show that the Portuguese count, that we matter in American society. So the Portuguese were not counted in 2010, which some people do not know. What happened was there was no ancestry question in the 2010 census, which meant the only way you could indicate that you were Portuguese is if you checked off some other race and wrote in Portuguese on that line. And then 2-3 years later, questions are being asked, well, what was the data? How many people wrote in Portuguese in 2010? And what happened was there was no code number. And that meant that anyone who wrote Portuguese was categorized only as white. So consequently, there is no data available for the Portuguese as an ethnic group for 2010. And we determined that was not going to happen. And we'll tell you a little bit more about how that was resolved. But going back just a little bit further with the background of Make Portuguese Count, there was a question around 2010, shortly after 2010, about whether the Portuguese would be considered Hispanic in the U.S. Census. Now, not too many people know this, but the race categories for the U.S. Census are determined by the Office of Management and Budget. And that is the government branch that dictates to all agencies of the U.S. government how races are categorized. And so the race categorizations were white, black, Native American, Alaskan Indian, Pacific Islander, and Hispanic, and some other race, and Asian in the 2010 census. There was a lot of discussion about whether Hispanic should even be a race. But when the question came up about whether Portuguese should be Hispanic or not, that question came to PALCUS, and at that point, a survey was launched and designed and implemented by Dr. Dulcwash Scott of Anderson University. And the results of that survey of the Portuguese community was that over 83% of respondents declared that they did not identify as Hispanic, and that they would not identify themselves as such on a census questionnaire. So those findings were reported to the Bureau's National Advisory Committee on Racial, Ethnic, and Other Populations as part of their working group. And as a result of our input, and there were other ethnicities who provided input as well, that the change in that race origin question that you'll see now in 2020 was developed, and it was determined in that report that persons who are Portuguese speaking would be able to indicate themselves as Portuguese under any race in that question. So that is the combined race origin question that you'll see for question number 7 in the 2020 census that I'll explain to you coming up.
And just a point about data here. So you hear us talk a lot about the need for data and why it's important. And this is a perfect example of that, because before we did our survey a few years ago about should the Portuguese be considered Hispanic, there was no data point that said, here's how the Portuguese community identifies. Now we could say anecdotally, here's how we think, but that doesn't mean much when you are working with government agencies that need data to support their decisions. And so having this survey with actual data gave us something concrete to stand on to say, no, this is how our community feels. And so, this is the direction you need to go. And so again, the point of Make Portuguese Count is for us to get data about our Portuguese community that we can then use for future initiatives. So, and Maria will cover that, but I just wanted to really make that point about data.
Yep. So what is the US Census? Of course, everyone knows that this happens every 10 years, that the US government counts every person living in the United States, young or old, citizen or non-citizen, documented or not. It is mandated by law under the US Constitution. And has been law since 1790. And it does take place every 10 years, no matter who is president. And it is neither Republican nor Democrat. It is simply the law of the land. And this next census will take place next month, but even sooner, as I'll explain to you, it'll be next week on March 12th. So their objective is to count everyone once, only once, and in the right place. So, yes, why is it so important? Well, Portuguese live everywhere. As we've done our research, we're finding there are Portuguese in every state in the Union. So it impacts your own quality of life. So there's $675 billion each year in federal funds that goes for the schools, hospitals, roads, public works, and other programs in your own community. So when you think about it, if a particular community does not count everyone in their municipality who is using their services, then if there's a shortfall, then it's going to have to be made up by the tax base and with higher taxes. Businesses make decisions about where to build factories. Certainly any business, worth its salt is going to do a business plan, and they look for the data in the U.S. Census statistics for that. Developers use the census to build new homes. Local governments use the census for public safety and emergency plans. And the congressional mandate is to determine the boundaries and number of congressional districts determined for each state. Now, certainly I can say for Rhode Island, where I live, our state has been losing population, and we are in a very serious situation where we could lose one of our congressional seats. So they're very concerned in Rhode Island that everyone who can be counted is counted, so we can hang on to that congressional seat, because there's only a finite number of congressional seats in the House of Representatives. The Senate, no, every state gets 2 senators. But in the House of Representatives, some states will pick up seats and some states will lose. So that's an important part of this too. So then moving on again, why is it specifically important to us as the Portuguese? And as I mentioned, we weren't counted in the last census. We haven't had a complete count in over 20 years. And I say that because in the 2000 census, there was an ancestry question, but it was only on the long form. And then only 16% of the population got the long form. If people, remember, there used to be a long form and a short form, and you prayed to God you didn't get the long form because that was going to take you so much longer to fill out. So we are not sure how many Portuguese we are in this country. There is something called the American Community Survey, which again is only a sample of 16% of the population, but we're not entirely sure. So back to the point about data that Angela was emphasizing. When you stand in front of a school committee and you want to argue for Portuguese language classes in your school district, they want to know, and I've been asked this myself. I have stood before more than one school committee defending or maintaining Portuguese language curriculum in that school district, and they will say, well, how many Portuguese are in this school district? Because they know that the chances are that the enrollees in those classes will be people of Portuguese heritage, that they will be the most interested. Political power. Federal, state, and local elected officials, they respond to their constituents in their districts with high Portuguese populations. And, we go every year just about to Capitol Hill, and we meet with senators and congressmen. And one of the first things the staffer will ask you is, well, how many Portuguese are in my district? And if you can tell them that, it's an eye-opener, especially when we emphasize the fact that we know that the Portuguese people vote at a rate 20% higher than the national average. That has come out in our PALCUS Index survey. So that's when they take the pen out of their pocket and they literally start to take notes. And they circle it on our talking points. So it makes a difference. And health studies and social services. There is a physician in Cambridge, Massachusetts, Dr. Elena Santos Martins, who has been trying to do a study on the percentage of Portuguese people who suffer from chronic diseases like diabetes, cancer, coronary heart disease. And she has not been able to complete her study because she does not have a total number of Portuguese in the area to base it on. She can't come up with percentage because she doesn't have a denominator. Or any social services group for the Portuguese population, they need to make a case for their grant proposals by saying how many Portuguese in that area. So everything these days is data-driven, and without it, our hands are tied as a community. So moving on, as I said, current data, we're not sure. We think that maybe from the American Community Survey, maybe there's 1.37 million Portuguese in the country. We do feel that this is the ranking of states, and some of them may surprise you. I mean, Hawaii is almost 50,000. Texas is almost 32,000. But we're not sure. We really want to know. And certainly over the generations, Portuguese have migrated. The aging population, as they retire, they go to warmer climates like Arizona and Florida. And their children now and grandchildren who are educated are moving to other states where there are jobs, like North Carolina, for example. There are more Portuguese there than there have been before in Georgia. But we need to know exactly what the data is. So how are we going to accomplish all this? Well, first of all, you probably want to know what the census will ask. There will only be one questionnaire per household. You count every person living in that household on April 1st, whether or not they're related to you. Now, if they're just visiting, you don't count them. They ordinarily live somewhere else. But it could be a boarder, whether they're paying rent to you or not. And be sure to count babies and children under 5 years of age. For some reason, they tend to be undercounted. So even if a child is born, on or before April 1st, make sure that you count them too. Do not count those living away in the armed forces or in college dormitories, even though they'll return to your home, because that they usually live away, and they'll be counted under group quarters, just like those in nursing homes, assisted living, prisons, or other group quarters. And as I said, if they're visiting you for a short time and usually live somewhere else, and very often this happens, you get visitors from Portugal, they may be with you for a month or 6 weeks or so, and they go back, you would not count them. So again, moving on. So what exactly are they going to ask? Well, I'm going to tell you, I've seen the questionnaire, and it's quick and easy. This is what you'd call a short form. It'll probably only take you 10 to 15 minutes. The person number 1 in the house will have a couple of more questions asking how many people live in that house, what kind of house is it multifamily, or is it a single family, is it a trailer? It'll ask, do you rent, do you own, and then it will ask specifically about that person. But for each individual person, there is a separate section, and it'll ask your name, your date of birth, your age, your sex, the race of each person, and the origins. And there is also a specific question as to whether or not the person is Hispanic, Latino, or of Spanish origin. You really have to answer all of those questions. If you don't identify as Hispanic or Latino or Spanish, you just check no. If you do, maybe you do have that heritage in your family, you can check yes and then write whichever it is. And then about the relationship of each person in your home. So what is your relationship to person number 1? Are you the spouse? Are you a child? Are you a parent, for example? The Census Bureau will never ask for your Social Security number, and this is important to understand because they don't care about who you are. They just really want to count you. They don't keep a file about you. They will never ask for money or donations. They will never ask for anything on behalf of a political party, and they will ask nothing about your bank or credit card account numbers. So when is this going to take place? Well, I mentioned March 12th, and that's next week. You'll start to get something in the mail next week. And it will be an invitation. It will be a letter that invites you to answer the census online. They're going to start online. And this is because they did an operational test in Providence County 2 years ago where I live, so I was able to participate in this. And through that test, they found that over 50% of the people self-responded online. So, of course, this is going to save a lot of money and expense in manpower for the census. So it's really quite easy. It'll have the URL for you to log on to, and it will have a code number for you to enter. And I'll show you what that screen will look like in a bit. But even if you don't have that code number, you can put down your address of your house because it's all by household. And you'll be able to go in and answer those questions for yourself and everyone living in your house. If you don't do it online, a reminder letter will be sent to you. And again, a second one a postcard will be sent again. But if you don't do it online by April 8th, a reminder letter and the paper questionnaire will come to you, just like in the good old days when we all filled it out on paper and mailed it back in. So if you don't get to do it online, you're not crazy about doing it online, it will trigger a paper questionnaire for you to fill out. If by the end of April you haven't done it online or by mail, it will trigger a visitor to your house. An official census taker will come and interview you in person, and they will keep coming, and they will try up to 12 times until they meet with you and interview you personally. So our recommendation is try to get it done on the first go around. And for older people in particular, who might be leery about, they're not comfortable with computers or they're leery about the online bit. If you have elderly parents, grandparents, aunts and uncles, say, hey, let's look for that in the mail and let me help you take care of this. Because it's very, very important that everyone be counted, and helping them out with this is important. So we're trying to sensitize our younger people to do that.
I know we're going to, well, I was just going to clarify one point, and I don't know if you know the answer to this, Marie, but in the event that somebody has to have a census taker come to their door, and I know we're answering questions later on, but given the rise of scams and people pretending to be PG&E and things like that, what should people look for when the person does come to their door claiming to be a census taker? ID, things like that. What should they look for to make sure that it truly is a census taker and not somebody that's just trying to get their information?
Well, hang on, because that slide's coming up.
Oh, great. Okay.
I'll answer that. It's coming up.
Got it.
I anticipated that one.
Yeah, I should have known.
Okay, so as I mentioned, there are several ways. There are three main ways that you can self-respond. First of all is online, and that begins next week. And this is what and I don't think you can see the bottom of it. This is what the welcome screen will look like when you log on to the URL. Okay? Now, at the bottom here, I don't know if you can scroll up just a little bit, but at the bottom is a list of different languages. And the one that's circled in red there, it says Portuguese. If you click on Portuguese, you can get the whole questionnaire in Portuguese. Okay? But otherwise, the rest of, the default will be English. Okay? But this is what the welcome screen looks like, just to let people know that if they really are more comfortable in Portuguese, they can answer it in Portuguese. And there it is. Okay? Going on to the next one, the second way that you can answer it, again, I said if you don't answer it online within about 3 weeks, it will trigger the paper form coming to your house. And this is what it will look like, all right? And this has actually already gone out in Alaska, because there are parts of Alaska that are very, very remote. They don't have internet connectivity, and they've already started in Alaska. So this is somebody from Alaska who already got theirs. But this is what the envelope will look like when you get the paper form if you don't do it online. Okay? And then another way will be on the phone, and that will begin on March 12th. And on March 12th, we will release to everybody what the phone number is. The phone number will be in English and I believe 12 other languages. Each one will have their own dedicated phone number. So there is a phone number for Portuguese, and we'll release it on March 12th. They don't want us to release it before then. They don't want people calling and getting frustrated because it hasn't gone live yet. So we will let everybody know, but it's a toll-free number, and if you dial the number for Portuguese, you will get a Portuguese-speaking census taker who will ask you the questions in Portuguese. We just want to remind people that when it gets to the race question, to be sure to tell them that your origins are Portuguese. Make sure that they write that down. I'm not sure which sotaque that the Portuguese will be in, but I'm pretty sure that you won't have any problems. It'll all be mutually intelligible, whether you're Azorian or Continental or Brazilian. I think it will work for you if that's what you want to do. Then on to the next slide. Now here we get to Angela's question, okay? Mm-hmm. So if a census taker comes to your door, you haven't done it online and you haven't done it in the mail, So sometime it would happen around the end of April that they will try. And the census taker will have an official photo ID, like picture on the right, and you can look at it and you can check it out. They also carry that official US Census Bureau badge, and that's how you know who they are. If you are really uncomfortable and you don't want to let them in, there is a phone number that you can call that we will also publicize, close around the end of April, if you have any suspicions whatsoever. A red flag is if they're asking you for money, because the Census Bureau will never ask you for money. They won't ask you your Social Security number, and they will never ask anything about any of your account numbers. So, if those questions come up, if they start, plying you with those questions, then that's not an official census taker. Okay?
Good to know. Thank you.
Yeah. So what happens to your information? So I have been to hundreds of meetings with folks across the country, and they say to me, why does the government want to know all that about me? Well, the point is they don't want to know that about you. They don't keep a file about you or your family. They just want to know how many there are like you. So the data that you give them, the information that you give them, it comes out in statistics on the other end. But your information is private. That, as a matter of fact, some people are saying, I don't want to do it online. It might get hacked. I mean, I have never seen so many safeguards be put onto any system. They have gone above board. I've sat in on a couple of seminars about the US Census security, and it's really incredible. Your answers are actually encrypted as you type. So it's not like, in transit, somebody's going to capture your information. It's going to be encrypted as you type. Plus, your information can't be given to anybody by law. It can't go to a government agency, any other government agency. It can't go to ICE, can't go to law enforcement. The president can't get it. Nobody can get it. And this has been historically the way it's worked. Even after 9/11, when they were trying to mine, somebody, the executive branch, I guess, wanted to mine census data for possible terrorists. The Supreme Court said, nope, you can't have it. So even at that time of national crisis, even then, they couldn't get the census data on individuals. So I have every confidence that your information is safe, it's secure, and it won't be used for any other reason than the statistics that the Census Bureau generates. So now this is what's really important to us. That is an example of question number 7. It will probably be question number 9 for person number 1 in the questionnaire, person number 1 in your household, but for all subsequent people, person number 2, 3, 4, 5, whoever lives in your house, there will be a section for each of them, okay? And this is what's so important for us. You see, it says, what is this person's race? And you've got the little blocks for white, Black, American Indian, or Alaskan Native. Then you've got the Chinese, Filipino, Asians, Native Hawaiian, and then down even to some other race. You check off as many races as applies to you and that person living in your house individually. Okay? People are biracial these days, even multiracial. You can check as many as applies to that person. Then, under that, you write your origins. Now, what you see in front of you is my answer. That's me. I'm the example there. Okay, so I identify as white. I will check off white, and I will write Portuguese. I am 100% Portuguese origin. I was born in the United States. My parents were born in the United States, but all four of my grandparents were born in São Miguel in the Azores. I am 100% Portuguese origins, and that's my answer on my census form. Okay? Now, you can write up to 6 ancestries, and I'll show you some examples here in a minute. But this is important to note that this is self-identification. You don't have to show your DNA. You don't have to show a passport. You don't have to show a birth certificate. It's how you identify yourself is your origins, your roots, your ancestry. Okay? So let me show you some other examples on the next slide. Okay, so let's say over here on the left, let's say my mother is white and Portuguese, my father is black and Cape Verdean. So I am biracial, and I will check off both white and black, and I will write Portuguese under white, and I will write Cape Verdean under black. In the middle example, let's say my mother is white and Brazilian and Portuguese. I will write both Brazilian and Portuguese and check off black for, let's say my father's Angolan. Or on the right, let's say someone's a native Hawaiian, but their ancestry is also maybe their mother is white and Portuguese. Their father is native Hawaiian. So they're a mix. The point is there's no wrong answer. And we met with the chief of ethnicity and ancestry from Census headquarters and asked, last time we didn't have a code number for Portuguese. Do we have one this time? And she said, absolutely. There is a code number for Portuguese. The Portuguese will be coded and will be counted this time. And I also asked about all the other Portuguese-speaking countries. So there is a code number for each one of them. Because last time there wasn't one for Brazil and there wasn't one for Cabo Verde. But now there is. So all the Portuguese-speaking countries. So that's Portugal, that's Brazil, Cabo Verde, Guinea-Bissau, Angola, Mozambique, São Tomé e Príncipe, Macau, Timor-Leste, they all have a code. So whatever you are, and whether you are part, Portuguese, Lusophone, and part something else, So, for example, my husband is Scots-Irish and German and some English, and, he's a mix, and I'm all Portuguese, but both of my sons, they can write up to 6 of those ancestries. So the last thing that the people at the Census headquarters said to us when we left, they said, please tell people to check off all races that apply to them and to write up to 6 ancestries. And no matter under which race you write Portuguese, it will be counted. You can check off black and write Portuguese if you are Luso-African, and it will be counted. And if you don't agree with any of this and you want to check off some other race and write Portuguese, do that. That will be counted too. Now, one little other caveat. I have an uncle, and he's 90 years old, and he says, I'm an American. I was born in this country. I said, well, Tio, your parents were born in São Miguel. He says, but I'm American. I said, well, you've got the best of both worlds. And if you want to write American, then write American. But you can also write Portuguese because you've got the best of both worlds. There's a code for American too. So some people I've picked up tend to feel that they are betraying their patriotism to their country, whether they're born here or naturalized. But you don't have to. You don't have to choose. So this is an important point for us.
So 2 things on this. Can you explain the Hispanic option. And so if somebody is Hispanic in Portuguese, how they would fill that out, because we don't see Hispanic on this particular question. And I know that's a separate question, right?
Yeah, good question. Yeah. The Hispanic question is the one before. And for most people, that's question number 6. So that will say, is this person of Hispanic, Latino, or Spanish origin? Yes or no? So I can think of at least 5 or 6 couples that I know personally where one person is Portuguese and the other person is Hispanic. So their children obviously have both. So if you have Hispanic, blood in you, roots in you, then yes, you can check off yes, and then you can write in whatever that Hispanic, origin is. You can be Panamanian or San Salvador or Mexican or whatever it is. But then even the Hispanics have to answer this question too. Okay? So then you would put the rest of it down there. You have to answer both 6 and 7, so whether or not you have Hispanic background.
So it would be best to still put Portuguese on question 7, not on question 6, if you have Hispanic and Portuguese heritage.
Right. I mean, if you write it on both, I don't think it's a problem.
Okay.
But I would say definitely, if you're Portuguese, write it on 7. Write it on 7. That's where it will count. That's where it will count.
Now, just a logistical thing. We can write up to 6 ethnicities, right? So let's say that even you have 3 or 4 European ethnicities. That line there isn't going to fit 3 or 4 ethnicities. So does it matter if you write it within the box or right below it if you need to list out multiple? Do you know? It's a little thing, but I know.
It's not a little thing, because actually I listened to a webinar just last week about this. So I've got the answer, I'm happy to say.
Great.
When you do this online, that field will accommodate up to 200 characters.
Oh,
it will expand to accommodate 200 characters when you do it online. If you're doing it on paper, you can write it in the box, above the box, under the box, up the margin. If it's anywhere on or around the field, they will capture it.
Okay.
They'll get it.
Got it. Let's move on.
Yeah. So where are we now on this campaign? Everything that I've told you, we've tried to condense in our media blitz. We've been visiting with people, and we have 76 captains across the country who have been talking to folks as much as they can in our grassroots campaign. But now we're in the midst of the media blitz. We have ambassador PSAs coming out, and these will be well-known personalities that you recognize. It's now in production. We've had multiple interviews in Portuguese language press, and we have gotten some grants for paid advertising for the hard-to-count populations of Fall River and New Bedford. So all of these outlets, specifically around New England, but also in California, are coming out with articles and advertising. And you should expect to see ads also on our TPI and Seek International. And these are just some of the media outlets who are working with us and are putting out the information now during this time of the media blitz. And you will see this it's already started actually. Portuguese Times has already run full page ads and 2 articles, interview articles, and there are 4 more coming there. So be on the lookout for more information too. But what we're asking everybody to do who hears this, tell everybody you know. You know, we are deputizing you. We want you to be the messengers too and help us spread the word. And just a couple of other things that are part of this campaign is Make Portuguese Count in the Portuguese classroom this week. It's the week of March 2nd to 6th. This is piggybacking on a nationwide campaign called Statistics in Schools that the Census Bureau has done. It's a way of teaching children about the census and civic engagement. But starting last October, we worked with the Institute for Portuguese and Lusophone World Studies at Rhode Island College and Dr. Silvia Oliveira, adapted some of those lesson plans for the Portuguese classroom, and we have reached out to over 145 teachers of Portuguese to use these lessons in their Portuguese classroom and to help the children convey the message back to their families of why the census is important, why they should participate, and to remember to write Portuguese. We are also working with all the faith-based organizations and houses of worship. A number of our captains have put bilingual notices in the church bulletins and are literally standing outside after Mass with some of our trifold pamphlets to let people know within these, 3 or 4 weeks what's going on. And if you haven't seen it, there's our new Facebook frame campaign on our Facebook page at Make Portuguese Count. And we are trying to find everybody who uses the Facebook page on the frame, shouting out, be like, Maria, and Make Portuguese Count too. And hopefully that anybody who hasn't heard about it yet will want to know more about it and show their support. And I think we're just about getting to the end. So these are our 3 young people. They are the poster kids for Make Portuguese Count. These are 3 young adults from Farmingville, New York, who have agreed to let us use their image. And thank you to Benvinda Santos for letting us use this photo that she took last Memorial Day. So this is an authentic picture. And these kids, they just say it. They are proud to be Portuguese, and you're going to be hearing more from them as well. And I think that's just about it. I don't know if this promotional video will play. If
we
you
can
want
try
to show it.
I don't know if we'll get the sound, but we can try. And if you can't see it, can you hear it?
I can't hear it, no.
Okay, then we can go to YouTube. We can post it again on the website and on social media. But it's also it's on YouTube for anybody that wants to go view it.
Right.
And on the Make Portuguese Count campaign Facebook page, we have a Twitter account. So we're all over social media. Okay, so questions. So I know one of the questions that we've gotten and you have gotten in person, Marie, is I don't know how to write in Portuguese, meaning like in the Portuguese language. And so I know it might just be a semantic thing, but when we say write Portuguese, that just means write the word Portuguese. You don't have to speak Portuguese or know the language or anything like that. Can you kind of clarify that point as well?
Oh, sure. I mean, it's funny because the phrase is write in Portuguese, What we're saying is please write the word Portuguese as your origin. And it was funny, it took me aback because a lady that I know quite well said, oh, but I don't know how to write Portuguese. And I said, no, I'm not asking you to write it in Portuguese. I'm asking you to write the word Portuguese as your origin. So we've been a little bit more careful with the language, but no, you don't have to write it in Portuguese. But I will tell you, if you happen to write Portuguese, they will pick it up. it will translate to Portuguese. They will capture it.
So,
They have,
okay.
yes, yeah. They one of the things they mentioned is, even if you get close to the spelling, in back in the old days in school, they used to say spelling counts. It's not quite as important this time. They will capture anything that comes close to it, and they even have a committee that will, work on any unusual spellings. So don't worry. Just make sure you get it in there.
And you can also write Azorian or Madeiran, correct?
Well, this is true. This is true. We haven't wanted to confuse the issue. However, there is a code for Azorian Islander. There is a code for Madeiran. There is a code for Portuguese. And there is a fourth code for the Portuguese total. So I was really concerned that if people wrote Azorian, it might take away from the Portuguese total, but they said no, there is a fourth code number that will add up Azorian, Madeiran, and Portuguese into one Portuguese total. So we are covered.
That's great. That's great to hear. We've also gotten some questions about what constitutes being Portuguese. Do you have to be a Portuguese citizen? But this is really about ethnic identity, not nationality, correct? Can you clarify that?
That's exactly true. This is completely self-identification. So it doesn't matter where you were born. It doesn't matter what your DNA says. If you identify as Portuguese, then you can write it as Portuguese. It has to do more with culture and your heritage than anything else. And I use myself as the example all the time. I was born here. My parents were born here. But I've always identified as Portuguese because of my grandparents. There will never be any proof asked for this. And no one is going to see this because, like we've said before, this is all about counting how many Portuguese there are and where they are.
Yeah, so no one's going to ask for your ancestry.com report, anything like that.
No, there's no documentation whatsoever required to write Portuguese as your origin.
Right.
And I want to say, please remember your children and your grandchildren. I was speaking to a gentleman in Florida, and he said, but I don't know how this is going to work for my grandchildren because their name is different. Their name is not Portuguese. And I said, it doesn't matter. I said, you are Portuguese, aren't you? And he says, yes, and they're your grandchildren by blood, aren't they? And he said, yes. I said, so they're Portuguese too.
That's good. No, that's a good point to know. And you can fill out all of those on head of household, right? So even if you have a different name of somebody living in.
Sure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Sure. But there'll be a section for each person living in that house. So, the wife may be of one heritage, the husband may be of another, but then each child will be of both.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good.
Mm-hmm.
What are some other, I guess, maybe misconceptions or points of confusion that people have with regards to the census?
Well, I think a lot of people are afraid that their information is going to be shared. I think that's the biggest fear. And I have full confidence that it is not going to be. And the very fact that Social Security number is not required means there will be no way to go back and identify you. And the Census Bureau takes the security of the information very, very seriously. I mean, I've been to, as I said, multiple seminars about the security of the information, and they are not messing around at all. So nobody is going to get this information. I will wager you, in my opinion, that more information is out about you from your Facebook account or
right.
your credit card account than will ever come out from the census. I think your information is probably far more secure with the census than anything else that we do on a day-to-day basis.
Okay. I think we've covered most of the basics. Is there anything else, any other points of interest? And if there's any questions from our attendees, please go ahead and type them into the chat box.
The other thing too I'm going to mention is that it is required by law. So it's a good idea, to do it, because they are going to try. I don't think anybody's going to be arrested or anything like that, but they are going to try to make sure they reach everybody. So it's not anything that is politically driven, even though there's been a lot in the news about it. It's neither Republican or Democrat. It's part of being of living in the United States. So it doesn't matter. As long as you are living here and this is where you're usually domiciled, then we all need to do it, especially for our Portuguese community.
No, I know that we haven't touched on, and we really don't have anything to do with the citizenship question, but have you been getting questions about that part? And if it
I really feel that once that was laid to rest, it hasn't come up again.
Oh, that's
good.
At least
in all the meetings I've had with people, I think they're pretty confident that question has not come up. As soon as the media frenzy about that died down, people don't seem to be worried about that.
Okay.
No, it hasn't come up since then. I really think that's been laid to rest.
Okay, good. Well, I think that's it, Marie. We've covered a lot, and so we are going to be posting this. The recording will be on YouTube. It'll be on our website. We'll post it to Facebook and all of our social channels, as well as this slide deck, so that people can take a look at that as well. And if anybody has any other questions after watching this webinar, please contact us directly at palcus@palcus.org, or you can email Marie directly. Her email was at the beginning of this presentation. So yeah, we're happy to answer any questions that you have. And so as I mentioned, this webinar will be archived online, so please share it with your family and friends. It is a free resource for everybody. There is an opportunity to sponsor these webinars. That way it keeps them affordable. And we have reached over 10,000 people with our webinars. And so it's a really great way to get the word out of a program that you might have, or, or your company. And with that, I'm just gonna say thanks again, Marie, for taking the time, and thank you for all the work that you have done over the last year and a half. It's really been quite possibly the biggest campaign that Palcus has ever taken on. And so it was a big job, and thank you for all your time and dedication.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And thanks everybody out there for attending. Thank you for those who are watching this later on, and we will see you next time. Thank you very much.